My company used to have another office in another state that was 2 states over. Most of the time I flew there, but sometimes we would have equipment or vehicles that needed to be delivered. On those cases, I volunteered to make the trip and would stay at the other office for a week at a time. Sometimes I would take a rest stop at a motel, and sometimes I would break up the drive by pulling over to a rest stop and sleeping in the back of the vehicle for a bit. One time I was driving a big box truck, like a big truck you would rent at U-Haul. We bought the truck used, and the back of the truck was filled with equipment and stuff from that office. I offered to make the trip. Unfortunately, the morning I was scheduled to take off, there was a delay for something I needed to take in that truck. I think it was a large copy machine, and it didn't arrive until almost 3 p.m. After loading it in the truck and getting ready to take off, I knew I was going to hit rush hour traffic, so I opted to delay my leave for 2 hours so I wouldn't leave until after 5 p.m. Even though there was still lots of traffic, it would only be local in the vicinity, and once I got out in the open, it was pretty much a straight shot until I reached the state line. Having to pull over a couple of times for fuel and restroom breaks, I got into a rural area north of my state after midnight. I pulled over one last time that night for fuel and coffee. The next stretch was going to be very dark and desolate, so I was preparing myself. I knew there was one more rest stop near the border, so I pulled over there to use the restroom, stretch my legs, and rest for a few minutes before moving on. When I pulled up to the rest stop, it was empty. It was somewhat well lit, and I am and was in pretty good shape, so I wasn't worried too much about my safety as I used to box. I went to the restroom and washed up a bit, but when I made it back to my truck, there was a pickup truck next to my truck and a guy standing next to my truck as well. He started to make small talk, and then he asked me if I was having any mechanical problems with my truck. I thought it was odd that he asked me that. I got back in my truck and took off. After this point, there's a long stretch that's mostly forest area, and it's kinda creepy to drive through it at 3 a.m. Having driven this route before, I knew there was a bridge up ahead. Suddenly, all the lights in my truck turned off. Headlights, instrument lights, even the running lights. I tapped on the brakes and looked behind me. Even the brake lights seemed to be out. Thankfully, it was a moonlit night, enough to be able to gauge what was ahead of me. I was more angry than panicked, so I slammed my fist on the dashboard and yelled. I guess that was the right move, because after I slammed the dashboard, suddenly everything came back up again. The lights were all fine. I drove looking for somewhere to stop, like a gas station, motel, shopping center, anything. I remembered a gas station I had stopped at another time, which was in a city about 10 miles up the road. I made it to that gas station and noticed that shortly after I pulled in, the same pickup truck with the same guy pulled over. He didn't pull up to the gas pumps and stayed in the street, but suddenly I got this chilled feeling like this guy did something to my truck while I was inside the rest stop earlier. I started to put some fuel in the truck, thinking about my next move. Then, just as I was about to get back in my truck, a cop car pulled into the station and I waved it down. I got out and made some small talk to the cop and pointed in the direction of the street where the pickup driver was pulled over. After I did that, the truck drove off. I think I asked the police about the road conditions and asked them if there was a motel or something ahead. When I got back in my truck, I decided that if the guy had done something that might disable my truck, I better pull off for the night. I kept looking behind me to see if the truck was following me. I think it was, but I couldn't be sure. I made it to another town a little bit larger than the last one I had left, and there was a motel. I checked in, locked my truck, grabbed my bag, and kept looking around, expecting something to pop out. I didn't sleep well that night, but nothing out of the normal happened. In the light of day, I eventually made it to the office, and I asked them to have the truck looked at by a mechanic. I told them the issue, and they reported back to me after I was home that the mechanic had found nothing wrong, and they didn't experience the same issue while driving it back. Maybe the mechanic overlooked something. That man gave me the creeps though, and I'm positive that he did something to my truck and was following me. Maybe he would have made his move if I ever pulled over on the highway to address the issue. I was in the U.S. Air Force stationed in Omaha in the late 1980s. At the time, I hung out with my roommate and another friend, all of us being girls. My name is Tracy, my roommate's name was also Tracy, just spelled differently, and the girl we hung out with was named Stacy. When we were together, everyone always thought that we were lying, and being the silly teenagers we were, we always found it funny. One weekend, we decided to take a road trip to Kansas City, Missouri. We were speeding down the highway, laughing and singing at the top of our lungs. We were happy and having the time of our lives. Stacy was driving, and she had a bit of a lead foot and must have been going too fast. because before long, a state trooper pulled up behind us and turned on his lights. Stacy immediately pulled over. By the time the officer made it to her window, she already had her license and registration in hand and the window down. The officer looked over at her and then looked at Tracy and I. Then he said, "I want you to follow me and don't try to run off or you'll all be going to jail." Then he went back and got into his car. Needless to say, the three of us were puzzled and talked amongst ourselves, wondering why he didn't just take Stacy's identification and write her a ticket. The officer pulled out slowly and we dropped in behind him and followed him down the road. He drove a few miles and then exited the highway. He drove a little ways and turned onto a dirt road that was surrounded by stalks of corn. We all stopped talking and we became more alarmed. However, we were young and scared, and since he was a police officer, we continued to follow him. The officer drove for some time down this dirt road and then pulled into an area that had a big beat-up old barn. He stopped and we stopped behind him, and a group of men with shotguns exited the barn. It wasn't until that point that we realized we were in mortal danger and panic set in. The officer walked back to our car and told Stacy to get out and follow him to his car. As she got out, she looked at Tracy and I still in the car, and there was sheer terror on her face. She followed him to his car, and he motioned for her to get in on the passenger side, which she did. Tracy and I were still sitting in the car, and the armed men stood on the side of the car looking at us. We began quietly praying to God to protect the three of us, and we prayed that Stacy wasn't being hurt and somehow they would let us leave. After some minutes, Stacy bolted out of the officer's car and ran back to our car and jumped in the driver's seat. She was crying hysterically. The officer got out of his car and walked back to our car, this time to Tracy's window as she was in the front passenger seat. He asked, "Is it true you're all in the Air Force?" Tracy replied, "Yes, sir," and the officer calmly said, "Get out of here and go back to where you all came from, and I better not see you all again." As soon as he finished, Stacy turned on the car, whipped it around, and sped back down the dirt road. She somehow navigated back to the highway. As she drove back towards the base, the silence was only broken by an occasional sob from one of us. Stacy drove for a while, and as soon as we crossed back over into Nebraska, she pulled over on the side of the highway. Then she began to sob heavily. Tracy and I hugged her and asked if she was hurt in any way. She shook her head, indicating no, she was not hurt. After she calmed down enough, she told us what happened in the police car. After she got in the cop car, she offered the officer her identification and she told him that she was sorry for speeding. He took her information and then he asked her, "What are you doing with those two N-words?" Stacy was white, and Tracy and I, who had been in the car, were both black. Stacy then explained to the cop that we were on a road trip. He told her that if she would do certain favors for him, he might let us go with a warning. At that point, Stacy had a complete meltdown. I guess while he was waiting for her to calm down, he finally looked at her identification and saw that she had also given him her military ID. He asked her if we were all in the military, and between sobs, she said that we were. He asked where we were stationed and then told her to go back to her car. As we sat there after Stacy told us what occurred, I think it hit all three of us at the same time that the only thing that saved us was that we were in the military and stationed at a nearby base. We hugged each other and cried until we could not cry anymore. We didn't report what had happened. Again, we were teenagers and didn't think that we would be believed over a law enforcement officer. We never talked about it after that day. That incident has haunted me for years, especially with all the what-ifs and situations of how it could have ended. But as I get older, what haunts me more is the thought that others may have not have been so lucky as we were dealing with that cop. One night, I was driving back home from my parents' house through a rural area in southern Germany. It was late at night and a relatively quiet ride, until the road ahead was blocked by a long dead tree type of log. I was super annoyed by this because this was literally the only road available. It would take me another hour at least to backtrack and take a different way. When I got out of the car to further inspect the roadblock, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Germany is tame when it comes to wildlife in rural areas, so there's usually no serious wildlife encounters apart from hedgehogs or deer. I started to move the log out of the way so that I could pass. The log was light enough that I could drag it across the ground by myself, but it took some effort. I don't know how long it took me to move it, but by the time I was finished, another car had stopped not far behind me, waiting for me to continue driving. At least, that's what I thought. As soon as I got back into the driver's seat and continued my drive, I noticed that the car was following me. At first, I assumed it might have been coincidental, because on a singular road with nowhere else to go, it was only natural that the other car would take the same route as me. But it got weirder as soon as I entered the next town and the car was still following me. I panicked, called the police, and informed them of the situation. I told them that I was driving home so that they could intercept the stranger as soon as we arrived at my home address. Since I was relatively close to my house already, I knew it'd probably take the police a few more minutes until they got there as well, so I decided to park a few houses away to not appear suspicious. I continued to sit in the driver's seat and see if the car was still around, and indeed, the stranger even parked directly behind me. At this point, I had the pepper spray at the ready. The doors were locked from the inside, and I was obviously super anxious when a man got out of the car and walked up to my window. He was waving at first and gesturing towards the back of my car. Confused by this, I decided to roll down the window a tiny bit to ask what's up with the guy. The man explained that he had only been following me to inform me that while he approached my car on the roadblock, a stranger had snuck into my trunk and was probably still there. I was absolutely bewildered, yet terrified by this. I didn't believe the guy outside my window at first, but then he showed me that he also called the police prior to our conversation, so I trusted him enough to get out of the car. Soon after, the police arrived, opened my trunk, and arrested a guy that had been hiding in there. Turns out, my initial stalker was telling the truth, and he was really trying to help me out. I didn't find out the details of who the guy in the trunk was, but I'm assuming he had ill intentions, probably to break into my house at the least. The car I drive doesn't lock automatically, and since then I've never drove around with an unlocked car. The scary part too is that in the car I drive, the trunk is directly connected to the front of the car with one of those little doors in the back seat. This guy could have potentially just crawled into the back seat from the trunk if he knew it was there. This happened last fall in early October. I'm a manager where I work. I had just locked the doors at 10 p.m. and was beginning the usual closing tasks when I got a call from my little brother. He's 17 years old and recently has really gotten into exploring abandoned buildings and climbing large structures like radio towers. I will be honest, his new hobby fills me with anxiety, but despite being a dumb teenager, he's still somewhat smart about his ventures. When I answered the phone, he was asking for my help and told me that he had been out exploring an abandoned house he'd come across. He was just about to leave when he said his car wasn't starting and the battery was dead. He also told me that he was alone. Usually he will be with a buddy, but he's got the kind of fearlessness where he doesn't bat an eye at a solo adventure. He didn't want to call our mom either because she was under the impression that he was at a friend's house, but instead he was a whole county away in the middle of nowhere alone. I was angry about his carelessness, but I decided to spare the lecture until I was actually with him. I told him to send me his location and I would be heading there soon. I got done closing around 10:30 p.m. and started speeding along the route the GPS took me. Usually I never speed, but the idea of my little brother out in some Alabama back road broken down alone didn't sit right with me. It took me about 40 minutes to get there. I started off on a pretty busy highway, then turned off onto a very remote highway and rode down that one for a long time. There was nothing but trees, fields, and the occasional tiny church. Eventually, I turned right down a very narrow dirt road that I nearly missed. I had to drive slowly. It was very unkempt and bumpy. The tree line on each side was so thick with darkness, and to be honest, the whole vibe of the place made me uneasy and gave me a bad feeling. I took an extremely sharp turn around a bend and saw my brother's car about a couple 100 feet up ahead. Not even 3 seconds after my headlights had shined onto his car, I saw him throw himself out of his car in complete hysterics. He sprinted towards my car, screaming at the top of the lungs for me to unlock the doors. I came to a halt and he jumped in. Not even giving me time to process his distress, he started shouting at me to get us out of there and that someone else was there. I immediately turned around and floored it off of that road. I'd never seen my brother in such a panicked state before. He was sobbing, having a full-blown panic attack. I sped down the road, and by the time we made it back to the main highway, he had calmed down. I asked him what happened and why he didn't call me sooner, but I realized that he had been too panicked to think about it. He said that about 20 or 25 minutes after he called asking for my help, he'd been sitting in his car listening to music and just staring off, when way down the road up ahead, a figure of a man or human appeared. He said he was worried at first that maybe it was a landowner coming to yell at him, but instead, the figure just stood in the middle of the road, seemingly looking towards him. It was too dark to make out anything about the figure, other than that they were clearly a person. He said that the person just stood there not moving for a good 3 or 4 minutes before they very slowly shifted to the right and vanished into the trees and darkness. At this point, pure panic had already set in for him because he was sure they were staring at his car and because of the unusual behavior of the figure. He said that they didn't pop up out of the trees until another 5 minutes had passed, but this time they moved a good distance closer. He was fully freaking out now, thinking that this person had to be messing with, or even worse, threatening him. He said he froze, his body not letting him do anything except stare out of his car windows in terror. The figure continued to stand in the middle of the road, and then they shifted back into the tree line once again. He said that the figure did that 2 more times, and each time they had inched a couple of feet closer to his car. He said they had been hiding in the trees again for about a minute when he saw my headlights behind him. The security of knowing that I was there gave him the courage to leap out of his car and make a break for it. The poor kid was so petrified he even left his phone behind in the car. We went back the next day around noon to jumpstart his car. My paranoid self even brought a weapon. The area was less threatening in the daytime. The abandoned house could be seen through the trees to the left of the road, and to the right, a couple hundred yards behind us, was a smaller road that led to a small radio tower. Given that it was bright out and my urge to know what happened, I poked around with my brother. Other than the house, the thick trees along the road, and the tower, there was nothing but fields to either side of us, no sign of a barn or farm or anything. I even looked around the ground floor of the house. My suspicion was maybe a squatter he missed in his venture was messing with him, but there was no sign of anyone living in the house. What unnerved me even more was the fact that around back of the house, a good stretch of the ground was littered in bones. They looked like cow vertebrae. There were hundreds of cleanly cut vertebrae everywhere. There weren't even cows in any of the fields nearby. I went back to the road and trekked past his car down the stretch where he said the person had been standing. It was a dusty dirt road, so I was looking for footprints or any evidence that something had been there, but there was nothing. After that, we jumped into the car. I dug into him a little bit and told him to never go exploring alone again. Then we left. I'm honestly at a loss for what he saw that night. He's not the type of kid to make up stories like this, and the level of distress that I saw him in, I don't think anybody could fake either. So this happened right before my 20th birthday when I was in the U.S. Navy. I was stationed at a Navy school in South Carolina, close to Charleston, but not actually in the city. It wasn't uncommon for people with cars to drive into the city, and everyone was friends with somebody with a car. I was friends with this guy named Peter, and we were close, and he was friends with this New Yorker that I didn't like much. We'll call him Trevor. Trevor had a car though, so we ended up doing a lot together. One night, after all 3 of us had tanked an important test, I convinced them to go for ice cream. We decided on this ice cream parlor on the far side of Charleston and piled into Trevor's truck. After we had gotten the ice cream, Peter went to start giving Trevor directions, but Trevor insisted he knew a shortcut and we needed to simply enjoy the ride. We didn't have anything early the next day, so we decided to screw it, and this would probably be a funny story later when Trevor got us lost. So we were driving for at least twice as long as it would have taken us to get back to base, but Trevor kept promising us that we were almost there. Meanwhile, we hadn't seen a building in at least 10 miles, and the road was so dark I felt like I was looking into an abyss. Trevor mentioned that he had to pee, so Peter and I told him to just pull over and take a leak. The road was lined with forest, so he had lots of options to go, but Trevor insisted on pulling all the way off that road in case another car came by. He found a dirt road and turned down it, and Peter and I looked at each other and both said that he needed to stop. Peter and I are both from the South, while Trevor grew up mostly in New York City. Peter and I both knew how some people are more of the shoot first, ask questions later type of people if he happened to be trespassing on someone's property. But Trevor kept saying that he was just going to go a little farther through the trees. I was thinking about how we were going to get shot because I wanted ice cream when we went through the tree line. About 20 yards in front of us was a big bonfire that was bright compared to the light from the moon. Immediately, I got nervous, and Peter and I both started screaming at Trevor to turn around. That's when we noticed the figures around the fire and those closing in around us. Trevor was frozen in fear in the driver's seat, so I reached into the front and put the truck into reverse while hitting him repeatedly on the shoulder. Trevor slowly turned around to check behind him to back up, only for him to freeze again. As I also turned, I saw more figures closing around the trail behind us. Peter by now had pulled out a flashlight and was trying to blind the figures while repeatedly telling Trevor to just go and that they'd move. So Trevor finally started to slowly make his way backwards while Peter was whipping his flashlight around. Meanwhile, I was making sure all the doors were locked and rolled up the rear windows and closed the back sliding windows. The crowd behind us parted and we made our way back to the road without any problems. We rode the rest of the ride in almost complete silence, and the 3 of us have never actually spoken about it since. The only thing that was said on the ride home was when Peter quietly told us that the people around us didn't have faces. Peter was the only one who would have seen them since he was shining the flashlight around. Trevor was focused on backing us up out of there, and I was focused on making sure that the truck was secure with the windows and locks. I trusted Peter though, and I don't think he would lie about something like that either. One night when I was 19 years old, I was driving back home from work late at night. It was around 11 p.m., and I was on this stretch of two-lane highway that I drive every time I go to and from work. At the particular moment, it was really dark outside. There were no other cars around me, either passing the other way or approaching from behind. The highway didn't have any sort of streetlights, and even the moon wasn't that bright that night. The only light for my eyes was my headlights cutting through the darkness. I had actually a good night of work that night for whatever reason, so I was in a good mood for the drive home, listening to music and just basically daydreaming about stuff. I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings, and out of nowhere, I saw a flash of red appear to the right side of my car. Before I could even react and slam on the brakes, this guy in a red shirt on a bicycle swerved from the side of the road right in front of my car. I hit him directly and felt the impact on the hood of my car. I was yelling out loud and freaking out the whole time as I slowed down and pulled over. I had been going somewhere between 50 to 60 miles per hour, and I felt like I had to have killed the guy. It would be a miracle if I somehow didn't. I got out of the car and ran back down the road to see how badly he was hurt. The only thing is, I didn't see him. I couldn't find the guy, his bike, his red shirt, or anything that seemed like it belonged to a biker scattered on the side of the road. I began searching the ditch on the side of the road with a flashlight, hoping to find him alive. Maybe I had just clipped him. A couple of people passed by slowly on the road while I was looking in the field for a body, and eventually a sheriff's car pulled up behind me. I told him what happened and how this guy just came out of nowhere. Before I could finish my continued rambling and crying at this point, the sheriff calmed me down and told me that I didn't hit anyone. The sheriff continued on to tell me that about 15 years ago, a young man in a red shirt was hit by a car while riding his bike right there on the spot on this highway. He died instantly, and the sheriff said that every couple years they get a call about someone driving on the highway who believes they've hit a red-shirted biker. It was the most relieving thing in my life to hear that I had hit a ghost. It had felt so real though. I felt an impact when I collided with it, but sure enough, when I got back to my car, there was no dent, scratches, or blood on my hood. I still drive on that road to and from work every day, and I now just instinctively slow down on that part of the highway, wondering if I will ever see the ghost bike rider again. The sheriff said that the station only received calls about the paranormal accident once in a rare while, and I wonder if it was a sign for me to slow down or be more observant when I'm driving. About 8 years ago now, I was driving across the Colorado and New Mexico border at around 4 a.m. I needed gas if I was going to make it through the rest of the morning. I was looking for a stop to fill up, but there wasn't much and a couple of other places were closed. I happened to come across a tiny little farm town with not much at all. They did have a little gas station, and it might be the only place I find for miles, so I decided to stop and fill up there. I hadn't seen another car for hours, and it was freezing cold outside, so I didn't expect to see anybody else there at the gas station. As far as I could tell, the town felt abandoned, but it was that quiet outside. It was a surreal feeling, honestly, except for the fact that it was cold outside. I started pumping my gas, certain that I was completely alone, until I noticed another car in the shadows near the back of the building. It was a nice-looking black lowrider with completely tinted windows. I noticed 4 very gangster-looking Latino guys leaning against it. I remember laughing out loud a bit at first, not just because I had no idea they were there, but also because they were wearing all black shorts, wife-beater tank tops, and knee-high socks. It was just a funny picture because of their outfits and how cold it was outside. They were just posted up against their car in the middle of nowhere at 4 a.m. looking so casual. Suddenly, without a word, all 4 of them got off the car and walked straight towards me. Now, under the lights of the gas station, I could see the full sleeves and face tattoos and realized that I probably shouldn't have laughed. Dropping the gas pump, I quickly got into my car and accelerated the quickest I probably ever have out of that gas station. Less than 30 seconds after I pulled out onto the highway, I saw headlights swerve out and follow me. Thankfully, I had some upgrades on my car and engine, and after a few miles, I was able to lose them as their headlights disappeared in my rearview mirror. I didn't think much of it, and even laughed at how bad I outran them, until a cop buddy of mine told me about the Mexican cartels running drugs through there to avoid the interstate. I'm guessing they would have left me alone if I never saw them in the shadows by the gas station or acknowledged them, but it was still a scary situation in the middle of nowhere that late at night. The most disturbing thing that's ever happened to me was on a long drive back to college for my last semester before graduation. I'm a night person and was leaving kind of late for the drive, but was expecting to get in around midnight. Since I was going to be living on my own after school, I was feeling a bit sentimental as it felt like I was leaving home for the last time. It's sunset as I was driving towards the highway, and there was a beautiful low fog in the fields along the road catching the light. I decided that it'd be nice to try a more scenic back road route than the normal boring interstate that I usually took. So I decided to cut it off before the highway and take a scenic route towards West Virginia. The last human contact I made for that night was when I stopped at a diner for dinner. I filled up on gas and I proceeded towards West Virginia as night fell. The fog ended up getting thicker and it was really hard to see through once it got dark, so I slowed my speed considerably. There are some small towns that I would pass through, but for a Friday night, it was oddly empty at each town that I went through. It was only 10 p.m., but all the local bars looked closed, and there were no lights on in any of the houses. It was strange, but I had never driven this way before, and maybe that's normal for those towns. Anyways, I was making slow progress with the fog on the back roads at night. I was worried about hitting a deer. At around 12 a.m., I got to a large national forest and I had to stop to pee. There was no other traffic around, so I left the engine running, expecting it to just be a quick stop. As I came around the car, undoing my belt, I heard voices maybe 40 or 50 yards into the forest, followed by a scrambling through the dead leaves and brush coming into my direction. It was pitch black out, so I couldn't see anything and I didn't know what was going on, but I was freaked out and did not want to find out more about the voices and the noises. I bolted back to the driver's side of my car and sped away down the road, happy that I had left the car running. A little while later, I was heading up towards some mountains and nearing a scenic overlook for an old fire watch tower. I pulled into the overlook to actually pee this time, as I never got a chance to earlier. I was at the top of a mountain and finally got cell service for the first time in a couple of hours. I checked my phone to see a string of concerned texts and calls from my mom, freaking out and asking if I had made it okay. By this time, I should have been back at college hours ago if I hadn't taken the detour. I knew that she wouldn't go to sleep until I was back safe, so I texted her that I was fine and back to school to put her mind at ease. She immediately called me, sounding extremely worried. I asked what was going on, and my mom said that she got a really weird phone call from West Virginia, which is where I was, but she didn't know that. She went on to say that she got a phone call from a gruff-sounding young man who said he needed to speak to me. She said over the phone that he had used my name, and that he was swearing at her while she could also hear other people in the background screaming and laughing. I have no idea how the stranger on the phone had gotten my mom's number, or how they knew my name. This was bizarre, because I was driving my dad's car, and I'm not registered to it, so even if somebody had ran my plates, they wouldn't get my name from that. I even paid with cash at the diner and gas station, and I wasn't even in West Virginia at this point yet. I couldn't think of anything that I had dropped that would have my name on it when I stepped out of the car briefly while trying to pee earlier. I was pretty freaked out at this point, but I told my mom that I was at school and safe and sound to not scare her anymore. I continued on my way and made it back to school without any further problems. I have forever been confused by what happened that night and who the people in the woods and on the phone were. One fall night, I was driving back home from a friend's house right before midnight. The highway I was driving on stretched out before me for miles, dark and empty. I'd been driving for about an hour when suddenly, at the edge of my high beams, a bunch of things blocked the entire road as they walked across. I would have guessed it to be a herd of animals, but as I approached a little bit closer to get a better look, my headlights illuminated a cluster of figures crossing the road. It was so strange. In the middle of nowhere, miles away from any town or even a gas station, There was a large group of people crossing the road together, maybe about 20 of them, seemingly unaware of my presence. It was so strange though, because they were all dressed in dark clothing, and I couldn't make out any faces since they were covered by hoods, and not a single person looked towards my car. They were confident that they wouldn't get hit, or just didn't care, I guess. The way they walked was even weirder though, as they all had an odd clunky looking gait, and they were very spaced out, with nobody standing really that near each other. It was very unsettling. I slowed down to stop, and waited for the last of the group to finish crossing the highway. I glanced out my windows and into the rearview mirror to see if I was being set up for a robbery or something else, but there was nothing that I could see around me, just darkness. As the group continued to cross, I even rolled my window down a bit to see if I could hear anything. I heard nothing. No one spoke or made any sort of noise, and in the whole walk across, not even one of them acknowledged that I was there or looked my way. They just moved as a unit, sort of shuffling across the highway until disappearing into the woods on the other side. I had no idea how to process what I had just saw, but I kept driving and hoped that there was a logical explanation to the sighting I had just seen, even though I couldn't think of one. About 10 minutes later, as I was continuing down the road, I finally saw another car, which was a relief after how nervous I was feeling. As the car passed me, I noticed the driver looking my way with an expression of either confusion or fear. I wondered why in the world they would look at me like that, but I soon found out why. I watched in the rearview mirror as they slowed down, almost stopping before speeding off into the night. Behind me, illuminated just a bit by the moonlight, I once again saw a group of figures had emerged from the side of the highway and began crossing. That's what the other driver had seen when I thought they were looking at me. It was another group of figures like I had seen, about 20 of them, walking in that same fashion across the road. There was no way it could have been the same group I just saw 10 minutes earlier down the road. That was by far the creepiest and most unexplainable thing I have ever seen while driving. It was late summer and I was driving home after a long shift at work. The sun was setting, leaving the highway dim and quiet. I was almost halfway home when I noticed something strange in my peripheral vision. As I approached a bend in the road, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing by the side of the highway. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. She was wearing a long white dress, her hair hanging over her face. I slowed down, unsure of what to do, thinking maybe she needed help, even if it was kind of odd for her to be out at this time of the day. I pulled over a few yards ahead. I glanced in the mirror and saw her still standing there, not moving. I hesitated, but finally decided to get out of the car and check on her. Maybe she really did need help. As I approached, I called out, "Are you okay?" But I got no response. I felt a chill creep through me, and something felt off. Just then, I heard the faint sound of a car engine behind me. I turned around to see another vehicle approaching. I thought maybe it was a good thing to have another person here to help the woman, but as the headlights swept across the road, I felt an icy dread wash over me. The woman was gone. One moment she was there, and the next she had vanished into thin air. I felt like I had just got myself into a very bad situation. I turned back towards my car, hoping to get away before anything else happened. The car pulled up beside me though, and through the rolled down window, a man spoke to me asking what I was doing there. He actually seemed really nice and asked me if I was having car trouble. I told him I was alright and thought I saw somebody else who might have needed help. He pointed towards the direction I had just come from, saying, "You saw her, didn't you? The woman in white. She's always here," he continued. He shrugged and said that she just appears and disappears, sometimes trying to get people to stop, and other times just watching. After making sure that I didn't need anything, the man was on his way down the road, and so was I after getting back to my car. The image of her face, hidden behind her hair, stayed with me though.
I was driving home from work pretty late one night. I often worked late, and during this time would leave work at about 10:30 p.m. and get back home at about 11 or so. My job was in the city, and I lived a ways outside of it in a much more quiet area. After leaving my job, I would take a freeway back for most of the drive, and then exit onto a highway. One time, when I was working earlier and there was a traffic jam, I found a shortcut to get home faster. It was a few more turns, but no stoplights, and in my opinion, easier driving. Or at least, driving that I liked better. Depending on traffic, it would either be slightly faster or slightly slower. On a night like this, when there was virtually no traffic because it was late, it was probably slightly longer, but I was in a habit of driving the shortcut route. It had started when I worked earlier shifts, and I got off when the roads were busy. On this night, I was taking some back roads to my house. These roads were very quiet, with some woods and occasionally quiet neighborhoods or people's houses on the sides. I was probably about 10 minutes away from my house. The roads that I was driving on were very quiet. I really wasn't seeing any other vehicles. This is exactly how I liked it, and it made for easy driving. As I was going down a straight spot in the road, I saw something up ahead. There was what looked like some kind of construction going on. As I got closer, I saw a few orange cones and then a person holding a sign on the right. It was one of those stop signs that lights up, and a construction worker holding it directs traffic. There was a man in an orange vest holding the sign and standing on the side of the road. Now, I was on a one-lane road. There was a lane for traffic going in the opposite direction as well. However, that lane was blocked by the two orange construction cones that were there. I began slowing down as I got closer. When I did, I was starting to wonder what exactly was going on here. There was only one person that I could see, the guy holding the sign. No other construction workers in sight. And other than the few cones, I didn't know what kind of work was being done. But still, I didn't pay it all that much attention. I was tired from a long day of work and just wanted to get home. I slowed my car down, and the guy was holding the stop sign, so I came to a stop. When I did, the guy holding the sign started walking into the middle of the road, right in front of my car. I remember that the guy was about average height, had long dark brown hair, and a bit of a goatee. When he started walking over to my car is when I started to really wonder what exactly was going on. The guy then stopped about a foot away from my car directly in front of it. He was just kind of looking at me, but not saying anything or communicating in any way. I was just sitting there with a puzzled look on my face. I saw the guy looking back behind my car, and I sort of saw something out of the corner of my eye in my side mirror as well. I looked back and saw another man. This guy was not a construction worker. He came from seemingly the woods on the side of the road. It was really bizarre. But even more strange was that this man was holding what appeared to be a baseball bat. He was approaching my car from behind and about 50 feet away if I had to guess. I wondered what on earth was happening. I just wanted to drive away. There seemed to be no real construction going on, and this whole thing was beginning to look like a trap. Meanwhile, the guy holding the sign was still there, stopping me from going. I rolled down my window just a crack and asked what was going on. The guy did not answer me. The man with the bat was still approaching from behind and now getting closer. I knew I needed to get out of there, and I suddenly put my car into reverse. I backed up just a few feet. When I did, the man with the bat was less than 10 feet away. Then I veered to the left extremely fast and swerved away from the man holding the sign. He tried to go in front of me, but was not fast enough, and I drove away. I ran over the two orange cones, but luckily they were the smaller kind. As I sped away from there, I saw the two men now standing together in the middle of the road. I felt lucky to have narrowly escaped that situation. Before I got home, I called the police and reported what happened. But I'm guessing by the time an officer got there, the men were gone. I continued to drive that same route home after that. It was just a routine that I didn't really think to change. Well, just about a week after the incident, I was driving home once again. It was around the same time, maybe 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. I came up to just about the same part on the quiet road. I could not believe my eyes when I saw the guy holding a stop sign again and the two cones on the road in the same exact spot as before. How could this be happening? As I got closer, I could see that it was the same guy. It was literally the exact same situation as the week prior. I did not slow down at all. In fact, I sped up slightly. When I got closer, the man took a step into the road and started waving his arm to try to get me to stop. I went to the left and into the other lane. I mowed down the two small orange cones and kept driving as the man stood on the other side of the road with his stop sign. I called the cops once again immediately after. That situation made me really angry how the guy was back out there in the same exact spot. I really don't know if they were found after that because I didn't hear anything about it. I also didn't see them again after that though. It was a trap, and I'm not sure exactly what the guy's plan was. Maybe it was to steal my car, or maybe something else. That area on the road where they had set up was a very quiet area. There were no houses, buildings, or anything like that in the immediate area. Plus, it was a long straightaway, so they could see who was coming from a long distance away. I'm hoping that they were never able to actually stop anybody. This is something weird and kind of creepy that happened to me just a couple of weeks ago. It was a Thursday night, and I had just gotten done with some shopping. I went to a couple of stores to get groceries and some other things after work. By the time I left to go home, it was probably like 9 p.m. I drove on the highway for a few miles and then exited to a quieter road. When I was on this road, I was just driving like usual, and out of nowhere, the car behind me honked. I looked back and saw just headlights in the dark of what appeared to be just a regular old sedan. At first, I wondered if they had in fact honked at me. There were no other cars around though, so it had to be them. It was really weird though, because I didn't know of any reason why they would honk at me. I was just driving down the road at a normal speed. In fact, I checked my speed. I was going like 58 in a 55, so I was driving around the speed limit. Did they think that I was going too slow? I know for a fact that I hadn't cut them off or anything. Maybe whoever was driving accidentally bumped the horn. I've almost done that myself a few times. About a minute went by, and then they honked at me again. Now I was even more confused than before. They were driving behind me sort of close, not right on my bumper or anything, but decently close to me. A few seconds later, they honked once more. I started to pull to the side of the road to let them pass me, but when I did, the car behind me did the same thing. Was it somebody that knew me? I couldn't tell who was driving and didn't recognize the car, but clearly they were not passing me and wanted to be behind me for some reason. They honked again as we were now driving less than 40 miles per hour and near the side of the road. I went back onto the road and sped up again. They did the same. I really didn't know what this person was doing. The only thing that I could think to do was just keep driving home. By this point, it was only a couple of minutes away. The car behind me honked several more times before I made it to my street. When I turned onto the street where my house was, the car behind me followed. This made me kind of nervous, and I still didn't know what was going on. When I got to my house, I pulled into the driveway. The car followed me and also pulled in right behind me. Now I was worried. I still couldn't tell who was driving the car because it was dark out. I stayed inside my car and did not want to get out. The person back there could be dangerous or something. I thought that they were going to get out of their car. I wasn't really sure what to do if they did though. Maybe they would explain why they had been honking at me. Possibly there was a logical explanation. Maybe my tire was going flat or something, and they wanted to make sure that I got home safely. I knew that probably wasn't the case though, but I was being hopeful. A few minutes went by, and I remained in my car, and surprisingly, so did the other person. After probably 5 minutes, all of a sudden, the car backed up quickly. It made it out into the street and then drove away. Then I got out of my car and looked around. None of my tires were flat or anything. My car seemed just fine. I went inside and was really confused by the situation. Since then, I haven't seen that car at all. I still wonder though, who it was and what they wanted. I live a little bit out in the country. Most of the roads near where I live are very quiet and surrounded by woods or farmland. There's a highway that goes out into more civilization, but other than that, I mostly travel on quiet roads. One time, I was driving back home at a little bit after midnight. I'm usually not out that late, but I believe it was a Friday or else a Saturday, and I didn't have work the following day. I had given a friend a ride home from a local bar. And just to show how rural things are out here, the local bar is almost 10 minutes away from my house. So I had already dropped off my friend at his house, and I was on my way back to mine. I was traveling west on a road that was not far from where I lived. I maybe had 5 minutes left before getting home. As I drove down this road, I suddenly heard the sound of something hitting my car. I couldn't tell what it was or what happened, but the impact was somewhat significant. It was so weird that I slowed down and then pulled the car over. I looked around, but it was really dark and mostly woods were surrounding me on both sides. After I had stopped, I got out of my vehicle and started to examine it. It almost sounded like a rock had hit the backside of my car, but I hadn't seen anything. I walked around, and when I got to the rear passenger side, saw a dent. It was a little bit above the wheel, and it did appear as though it was possibly a rock that had hit my car. But where had it come from? Just as I was thinking about that, I looked up. About 100 feet back, maybe a little bit less, there was a man standing in the road. He looked like he had just come out of the woods. As soon as I saw him standing there, he threw something at me. The guy had a pretty good arm, to be honest. I saw what looked like a rock flying towards me. It missed just a few feet to the left and went into the woods. But I now knew what had hit my car and how. The only question left was why. But I didn't want to wait around and ask. I ran around my car to the driver's side and got back in. When I got to the driver's door and was getting inside, I noticed that the man was now in a full sprint. He was running towards me, and I put the car into drive and sped out of there. The man had made it to within probably 20 feet of me when I left. I don't know what he had planned on doing. I got home and then called the cops. After that, I haven't experienced a situation like that since. It's just so bizarre to me, because I don't know why anybody would do that. I also don't know why anyone would be out there. It was a rural stretch of woods on both sides of the road. I'm hoping that that guy doesn't try doing that to anybody else. I have a job in the city. It's a major city with all of the tall buildings and everything that you would expect. My house is about a 20-minute drive, and I commute to and from work every day. It isn't too bad, but there often is rush hour traffic, especially on the way home. This event took place about 4 months ago, and after a long day of work. I got done at 5 p.m., which is when many other people do. Many times I'm able to leave a little bit earlier, but on this day I didn't. There was rush hour traffic and many other cars on the freeway. I would take the freeway for about 10 minutes, then the final 10 minutes of my drive would be on quieter roads. So just about 5 minutes into the drive, things were starting to get really backed up. We were crawling along the freeway, and I was in the far right lane of 4 total lanes. The one in the far left was the carpool lane. We started moving a little bit, getting up to maybe 40 miles per hour. Still slow, but faster than we had been moving. At that point, there was a little bit of an open space in the lanes next to me. I saw a car come up from behind 2 lanes over. When it got about even with me, it changed into the lane next to me without a turn signal. But then, it kept going and cut into my lane right in front of me. I had maybe a car length and a half between the car in front of me. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting the guy. He had no turn signal on, so I didn't even know that he was turning. I honked my horn and was pretty ticked off. The guy was now right in front of me. I cooled off after a minute or so as traffic continued to lighten up. Cars moved around a little, and the guy that cut me off went out of sight, passing some cars. I also switched lanes to pass a semi-truck. After that, though, traffic started to slow down again and get congested, and just a couple of minutes later, I saw the car who had cut me off again. He had gotten stuck behind a semi-truck, and there was a line of cars passing him, which is where I was. I noticed a little bit of a gap between myself and the car in front of me. I sped up, not wanting to let him in, remembering how he had screwed me before. He started to try to move over in front of me, but couldn't. I passed him by, and he got in line behind me. Unfortunately, the person behind me was nice and let him in. As soon as traffic lightened up a little more, and we got moving again, the guy swerved around me. It was borderline reckless, and he then cut me off again. I had enough of this guy and just wanted to get away from him. Plus, my exit was coming up. I switched lanes to the right. I then saw the guy start to slow down. When he did, I passed him and saw him flipping me off. I wasn't going to let this bother me. I knew that I didn't do anything wrong, and he was driving like an idiot. Soon, I changed lanes again, but noticed the guy changed lanes and he was still behind me. When I took my exit off of the freeway, I saw the guy change lanes suddenly and take the exit behind me as well. This was a little bit concerning because I did not want this crazy guy following me home. As I drove down one road, he was right behind me the entire time. I changed roads to another one, and he was still there. The longer that he followed me, the more frustrated I became. I could not believe this guy. How crazy do you have to be to follow somebody home after cutting them off? When I got to my street, I wanted to confront him and give him a piece of my mind. I arrived back home and pulled into my driveway. When I did, the man stopped at the end of my driveway but didn't go in. I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood and have a somewhat long driveway and large front yard, so I was surprised that he would follow me all the way back but not go into my driveway. After I parked though, I got out of my car. I was feeling brave, I guess, because I didn't feel in any danger at all. I think I was more mad than anything. After I got out, I walked behind my car and looked out to the man. He was still inside of his car with the engine running. I yelled out to him, asking what his problem was. Then, suddenly, the man started driving. He started going up my driveway and heading straight for me. It was like he was trying to run me over. I jumped back and ran behind my car, which was all I had time to do. He got close, but then slammed on his brakes and stopped just a few feet away from the back of my car. Then he turned to the left, where I was, and started driving forward. I just ran around to my backyard trying to get away from him. He didn't hit me and stopped at the end of my driveway. After I had made it around to the back of my house, I heard some tires screeching, and finally, the sounds of him driving away. When I was sure that he was gone, I walked back out to the front yard. I saw some tire marks in my driveway and saw that the guy had also ran over my mailbox. But other than that, everything was fine. Of course, I called the police and reported him. But unfortunately, in the midst of all this, I didn't remember his license plate number. Since this experience, I feel like I've become more of a defensive driver. Luckily, I haven't had any more problems with people on the road. I also haven't seen that guy since. This happened a couple of years ago. I was driving back home one night on a quiet road. There was a highway that I had recently turned off of to get to my house. I was still about 10 minutes away from home though. As I was driving along that road, suddenly my car started slowing down. I didn't know what was going on at first because my car always ran great. It was only a couple of years old at the time and never had any problems. Then I realized that I had ran out of gas. The light had come on earlier and I had simply forgot about it. My car came to a stop and I felt really stupid about making such an obvious mistake. My first thought was to call a friend and ask them to get me some gas. But when I took out my phone, I wasn't getting a signal. In this area, it wasn't that big of a surprise. I tried and tried for like 10 minutes, but it just wouldn't work. Plus, it was pretty late at night, almost midnight, so even if I could get my phone to work, my friends were probably asleep by now. I knew the area really well and knew that there was a gas station just about a mile away. It would be about a 20-minute walk, but the weather was nice, so I decided to just walk and get some gas and then bring it to my car. It really wasn't all that big of a deal. I got out of my car and luckily had a small gas container in the back. It was empty, but I kept it in my car mainly to buy gas for my lawnmower, so it worked out well that I had it in there. After getting out of my car, I started to walk along the side of the road. Now, the roads were very quiet. Since my car had ran out of gas, maybe one or two other cars had passed me by. I hadn't even really noticed. The road did not have a sidewalk or anything, so I was just walking a few feet off the shoulder in the grass. Surrounding the road on both sides was somewhat dense woods. I remember that when I got a ways up from my car, I heard a car starting to come down the road behind me. It was coming from the opposite direction, back where my car was. I heard the sound of the car then slowing down, and I stopped to look behind me. I saw a pickup truck coming to a stop next to my car on the road. They were probably stopping to see if I needed any help. I turned around and thought about asking whoever it was for a ride to the gas station. What I saw, though, was a man hopping out of the passenger side of the truck and another guy get out of the driver's door. Then, they put what appeared to be ski masks over their face and approached my vehicle. I was confused and stopped, no longer wanting them to see me. And I'm pretty sure that they hadn't seen me and didn't know that I was there. They probably thought that I was still inside of my car. I moved back, closer to the woods, but kept watching. They looked inside of my windows. One of them used his phone as a flashlight to look in. The other guy knocked on one of the windows. They also tried opening all of the doors. After this happened, the guys looked in my direction suddenly for whatever reason. They seemed to notice me, because right after, one of the guys started walking over to me. The other walked back over to their truck. When I saw this, I turned to keep walking to the gas station. I heard the sound of one of the men running, and I looked back to see the first guy sprinting and the other guy now inside of the truck, and began driving towards me. Now I had no other choice but to go into the woods. I darted to the right and went into the forest like a deer. I just started running like crazy, and it was really thick. There were all kinds of trees and bushes and branches. I heard the first guy start to enter the woods a ways back from me. I kept running though, not knowing where the woods led or anything. After probably 2 minutes straight of going as fast as I could through the woods, I reached the other side. I saw a house and a massive yard. I kept running and no longer heard the guy behind me. When I made it closer to the house, I ran behind it. There, I caught my breath and tried to figure out what I was going to do. At this hour, I did not want to knock on the front door of the house. I didn't think they would answer. I waited for several minutes and then carefully headed back down their driveway to the street. It was a really long driveway, and eventually I got back to the street that I had been walking on. The men and the truck were nowhere in sight. I continued my walk to the gas station, but walked extremely close to the edge of the woods. That way, if I saw the truck coming, I could go back in. In fact, when I heard a car coming not long after I started walking again, I jumped into the woods. I hid and waited for it to pass. I couldn't tell if it was the truck or not, so I have no idea if it actually was, but I wasn't going to take any chances. Eventually, I did make it to the gas station. Then I walked back to my car, filled my tank with what I bought, and then made it home, after what was a very memorable night. Looking back, I don't know what those men wanted, or who they were. I'm really glad that I got away from them though.
This happened during one really cold night in the winter. It was well below freezing, and I lived in an apartment and drove an older car. I had had the car for a long time, and I knew that I had to start the engine a lot in the winter. If it was really cold and I didn't start the car at least once a day, sometimes the battery would die. So on this night, it was especially cold, and I had used the car earlier in the day, but it had been hours. I didn't want to take any chances, so I decided that I would run the engine for a little while before I went to bed. Now, it was probably like 11 p.m. or so at this time. I left my apartment and walked outside to the parking lot. My car was parked in front of my building, and several other cars would park there as well. There was an underground parking garage, but it costed extra money each month to park there, and I didn't feel the need to get it. So when I got outside, it was very cold and very quiet. Even though I was wearing my winter coat, a warm hat, and gloves, I was still somehow freezing. It was even kind of hard to breathe with the wind blowing cold air in my face. I got inside of my car and started up the engine. It started, but it sounded like it just barely started. I realized I had definitely made a good choice on coming out here. Usually, I think you're supposed to run your engine for like 10 minutes or so at least, but I'm honestly not sure, and it probably depends on the vehicle. So as I sat there in my car, the heat obviously wouldn't work much until the engine warmed up a little. I was freezing, and I didn't want to sit there in my car for like 10 minutes, so I had the idea to go for a little drive around the area. That way, the engine would warm up faster due to driving, and I wouldn't just be sitting there bored. So I backed out and headed out of my apartment complex. My apartment has a little walking trail behind it, and then a woods, and on the other side of the woods is a neighborhood. In front of my apartment complex is a somewhat quiet road leading to a busier one. My plan was to just drive around maybe the neighborhoods behind my apartment for like 10 minutes and then go back. So after I left, I took a right, and then went down a ways and took another right. After going down that street, I was in the neighborhood over there. It was a lot of different roads with houses on them. Now, it wasn't like a super populated neighborhood. They had a little bit more space, with some woods and larger sized properties. I started driving down a few of these roads, and nobody else was out driving or anything, which was to be expected. I was mainly paying attention to the heat in my car, waiting for it to warm up. If I started to feel it warming up, that meant the engine was warming up. I remember that I was driving through an area between one neighborhood and another where there was a lot of trees. That's when I saw a man emerge from a woods area, walking through the snow. He then stepped out onto the street and stood in my lane. He was a ways up, but I started to slow down. The guy was wearing a really big coat and was dressed for the weather. He had gloves and a hat and what looked like snow pants on as well. He was just standing there in the middle of the road now. At first, I thought he was just going to cross the street, but he wasn't. It was unclear why he was standing there. It seemed pretty strange to even be out at this time and in this weather. I had to slow down all the way to a stop to wait for this guy. As I was stopped there on the road, he looked at me and kind of waved me over. The guy seemed sort of strange, and I wasn't sure what he was trying to get me to do. As I sat parked there, he began walking over to me. Then he walked to my driver's window as if he wanted to talk to me. I rolled my window down and was honestly surprised that that even worked. When the temperature got this cold, sometimes the window would be frozen shut. After my window rolled down, I thought that the man would talk to me and explain what he was doing out here or something. Instead, as soon as I rolled the window down, he started to aggressively reach inside of my car. It seemed like he was going for my keys in the ignition. As a reaction, I tried to bat his hand away. Then I stepped on the gas and went forward. The man had to take his hand out of my window, and I drove away from him with him standing on the side of the road. I figured that's enough driving around time for me, and I headed back to my place. I was extremely close to my apartment, just on the other side of it. I drove back around to the front and then entered the parking lot. Then I got back to my parking spot where I typically parked in. I turned the car off and got out. As soon as I did, I noticed the same man. He was coming out of the edge of the woods behind my apartment building. It was pretty far away, but the woods that he was coming out of was not very far at all from where I had seen him. I didn't realize that he probably could see where I was going, and I wasn't even that far away. I hurried and ran for my apartment door as I saw the man starting to walk closer to me. I made it inside and then went up to my place on the second floor. When I got up there, I went to my window and looked out into the parking lot. There, I saw the man was now standing at my vehicle outside of it. I watched him try to open the door, which was locked. I called the police and reported the incident. When I went back to the window, though, the man was gone. The police came out and talked to me and said that they would keep an eye out for the guy. Luckily, he wasn't able to break into my car or anything. I never saw him again after that. I'm not really sure what he was doing outside, but I'm really glad that I got away from him. This happened when I was driving home from work about a year ago. It was very late at night, and I was driving on a quiet road. It usually took me about 20 minutes to arrive back, and this drive was going just like any other. After I exit the highway, I drive on a quieter road for about 5 miles. This road has mostly wildlife on both sides. When I was driving on this road, I saw blue and red flashing lights up ahead. I assumed that the police had pulled somebody over or something. The closer I got, the more I could see. Soon, I realized that there was somebody also standing on the side of the road. This person was wearing a safety vest and looked sort of like a police officer. I slowed down and soon made it even closer. The car with flashing lights did not appear to be a police vehicle, though. It seemed like a regular car, but just had the flashing lights on it. The man standing in the road started walking across as I got closer, and I slowed down even more. He then motioned for me to stop, so I did. I was very curious as to what this was. This particular area was very rural, and there was just kind of woods on both sides of the road at this point. After stopping, I rolled down my window to talk to the guy. He had dark hair and was wearing a black cap and a black jacket with the vest. He also had a flashlight and shined it at me, which was super bright. He said hi and then told me his name, but I forgot what it was. The man spoke kind of fast and told me that they were just conducting some searches around here. Apparently, it was going on in other nearby roads. I wasn't really sure what he meant, and I asked him why. He said because there had been some criminal activity in the area. I asked him if he was the police, and he told me no, he was not the police, but he said he was working with the police department. Then the man asked me if he had consent to search the back of my car and told me to unlock the back doors and trunk. He started moving back and was about to grab my back door handle. I said no and then slammed my foot on the gas, driving away from him. I heard him telling me to wait as I left him standing there in the middle of the road. I knew the guy was clearly running some kind of a scam. Who knows what he was going to do if I unlocked the car for him? He didn't give me any real details, but just skimmed over everything. I immediately dialed 911 and reported him to the police. I was told that an officer would go to the location and check it out. After that, I finished my drive home. I made it back, and I really hoped that nobody else stopped for the guy. I'm not sure exactly what his plan was. To say there was illegal activity in the area was so broad. Unless he was talking about himself, it seemed like a terrible lie to get me to open my doors. Since then, nothing like that has happened, and I really hope that the police found the guy. This story took place a few years ago now. I know looking back that the situation could have been handled better on my part. I feel sort of dumb even telling it, but I want other people to hear it, so maybe they learn from my mistakes. I was 19 years old and was at my parents' house. My older sister and her boyfriend were staying over, and we lived in a very populated neighborhood. There are lots of houses on my street, and many other streets nearby as well. Our house is sort of at the end and probably the biggest one. So we were hanging out one night and our plan was to get pizza. My mom made the order and I offered to go pick it up. I had recently gotten a new car and I really enjoyed driving it. I know that we could have had the pizza delivered, but we would always just go get it. The pizza place was just a little over 5 minutes away, so it wasn't a big deal. Plus, we could save money on the tip. So I left the house at some time after 7 p.m. The sun had set and it was pretty dark out by now. I went out to my car and was parked at the top of our driveway. Then I backed out and into the street. As soon as I finished backing out, I saw a car parked on the side of our street with its headlights on a little ways back. There were not a lot of cars parked on the side of the street typically, but it was also not that uncommon. When I started driving away, I saw the car start driving as well, but behind me. I approached the stop sign at the end of our street, and when I reached it, the car was right behind me. I turned, and so did the car. It was the close following distance that really made me take notice of it, though. I was driving the normal way to the pizza place, and when I made the first turn, the car behind me did it as well, but like right up on my bumper. I continued down the street a little ways, and at the next turn, once again, the car did the same thing. That's when I went from thinking maybe it was an overly aggressive driver to somebody deliberately following me. I had absolutely no clue why anybody would want to follow me, though. I turned again and sort of pulled over to the side of the road. I wanted the car to go around me, but no. Instead, it started pulling over as well. Then I started to panic. I had no clue what to do, so I got out my phone and I called my mom. When she answered, I told her that I was being followed and I wasn't sure what to do. As I was talking, I kept making random turns and the car would do the same. I was kind of trying to lose the car, but I wasn't doing a very good job. My mom told me to come back home, and if the car was still following me when I got back, she would call the police. So I kept driving and now headed back for home. It took about 5 minutes or so, and the car was behind me the entire time. When I got back to our street, I pulled into the driveway. The car did not pull in after me, but instead drove a little ways down. It appeared to park in the same spot that it was at before on the side of the road. After I parked my car, I got out and sprinted for the front door. I got back inside and then showed my parents from the window where the car was. It was still parked there. We couldn't quite see the license plate though, but we called the police. About 5 minutes later, the car drove away. When the police got there a little while after, it was gone, and I talked to them and told them my story. We were all very disappointed that the car had gone away, and after the police left, I was really nervous that it would have come back. After that though, I never saw it again. Looking back, I should have drove to a police station when the car started following me. I could have called the police as well. I probably shouldn't have gone back home, but I guess the car already did know where I lived. I'm still not sure exactly what was going on there though, or what he wanted from me. This happened when I was driving to work very early one morning. It was probably a little bit after 5 a.m. and very dark and quiet outside. I enjoyed driving to work this early because of that. There was hardly anybody else out, and it made driving easy. Well, I work about 15 minutes from my house. I don't really take any major highways to get there though. It's mostly just quieter roads. After leaving, I drove the first 10 minutes no problem. As I was driving on a quieter road, which would go all the way to my work, I saw a guy riding on a bike up ahead. He was riding sort of on the side of the road. This road had 2 lanes, one going in each direction, and not much of a shoulder or anything. So the guy on the bike was like sort of on the line. I was planning to go into the oncoming traffic lane to pass him, because nobody else was out driving or anything. There wasn't another car in sight. When I got closer to the guy riding the bike though, he moved to the left. Now he was driving right in the middle of my lane. I slowed down, and when I got closer still, the man moved over some more. He was kind of starting to swerve all over the place, and I wasn't quite sure what he was doing. It all seemed very controlled though, not like he didn't know how to ride the bike or something. It was like he was trying to swerve around. I was now going at about the same speed as he was, very slow. I moved over to the other lane, but then he moved over as well. He was going back and forth between lanes as if he was trying to block me. It seemed like there was no way I could safely pass him, so I just drove slowly behind him and waited for him to move. Either he had no idea that I was here, or he was purposely trying to block me. After following him at a snail's pace for like 2 or 3 minutes, I finally honked at him. He was going to make me late for work, and I couldn't take it anymore. After honking, he still didn't move. He remained in the middle of the road and actually gave me the middle finger. He didn't turn around, but just stuck his hand up in the air. So clearly he knew that I was back here, and I wanted to get around him, but I guess that he was just trying to be a jerk. So I continued behind him now for about another minute. There was a stop sign up ahead and an intersection. I would have the option to turn right, and I took it. Now, I wasn't quite sure where this was going exactly, but I was pretty sure that I could still get to work this way. After turning right, I then took a left. I figured that if I found another road soon going left, I could reconnect with my original road. Then I would almost certainly be ahead of the guy on the bike. So I drove for a few minutes, and then was able to connect back with the road like I had planned. When I did, I was just a little ways ahead of the biker, and could see him a ways behind me. I drove on this road for less than a minute before my workplace was up on the right side though. I turned into the parking lot and parked my car. Luckily, I had just made it and wasn't late. Right after I parked, I saw the biker going by on the street. He looked at me the entire time, but didn't do anything. Then I went inside to work. The workday went on as normal, and I don't leave the building at all when I'm there. Hours later, when I was leaving for the day, I walked out to see that my car was all scratched up. It appeared as though somebody had keyed it, and I thought I knew exactly who it was. It had to be the guy on the bike. For whatever reason, he was trying to make me mad, and then when I honked at him, he got mad. I couldn't believe it. Unfortunately, there wasn't much that I could do. There was no security cameras in the parking lot, and nobody saw him do it, so sadly, I had no proof. I also had no idea who exactly he was. I got my car fixed, and after that, didn't see the biker again. I don't work that job anymore, but whenever I think about it, I think about the biker story. This took place several years ago. It all started one night when I was driving home from work. It was rather late, I think a little bit past 10 p.m. My job back then was almost 30 minutes away, and I lived in a house that was a little bit out there. It was sort of far from the city, and lots of woods and country land. So this night, when I was driving home, I was on a quiet road just a few miles from my house. I saw a man on the side of the road sticking his hand out like he was hitchhiking. It was one of the most bizarre things that I've seen. It was just so unusual to see a hitchhiker there. I had never seen one before. How did the man get here if he was hitchhiking? There wasn't even a sidewalk. Obviously, I wasn't going to give him a ride, and I passed him. He did look at me and wave, and he really wanted me to stop, but I would have had to have been crazy to do so. Shortly after, I made it home. Now, fast forward a couple of days later, I was out driving again. I wasn't coming home from work this time, but instead went to the nearest grocery store to shop. It was nighttime, but not very late, maybe like 8 o'clock. As I was leaving the store and about to merge onto the highway, I saw the guy standing on a sidewalk. At first, I didn't remember him, but when I did, I couldn't believe it. He was still here in town. I was thinking, what are the odds of seeing this guy again? After that, I went home. Now, fast forward one more time to a few nights after that. I was coming back home from work late at night again. My work schedule was all over the place back then. I never really knew what time I would get off of work, and I was also scheduled at all kinds of different hours. It was very unpredictable. So I was driving home and had made it all the way to my street. It's a very quiet street, and the yards are large and heavily wooded. The houses are spread out, sort of by a lot. It's a very nice place to live if you value privacy. But when I was driving down the street, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the hitchhiker again, and he was actively hitchhiking. He looked directly at me as I approached and was waving at me. The guy had a backpack on as well, and I actually almost stopped just to ask him what on earth he was doing out here. I knew he didn't live on my street, and I didn't think that he lived around here at all. If he did, I have no clue why he would be trying to hitchhike. I had a bad feeling about him, so I just passed him by. Just seconds later, I arrived home and turned into my driveway. I drove up and parked, and then got out and went inside. I was puzzled by the strange man, but I brushed it off. I didn't think about calling the police on him or anything. When I worked late, I would also stay up really late. For me personally, it takes me a while to unwind after getting home. It's rare that I can just get home and fall asleep just like that. So it was probably like midnight, and I had been home for a little over an hour. I was in the living room eating something and watching TV. For whatever reason, I glanced out the front window. When I did, I saw a figure out in the yard near a tree. When I looked closer, I noticed that it was the same guy. My front yard is large and partially wooded. The guy was near the woods separating my yard from the street. I watched him just standing there, looking in my direction. I had no clue if he could see me or not, because it was really dark and he was pretty far away. I looked away to grab my phone, ready to dial 911. When I looked back though, he was gone. Now, there were a million places that he could have went. I looked out of the window for several minutes, but saw no sign of him. I then went around just about every window inside of my house to see if I could locate the man. I couldn't see him though. I figured and also hoped that he had left my yard and went elsewhere. Who knows what this guy was even doing? I tried to return to watching TV to take my mind off of it, but it was difficult. I felt paranoid that the guy would return. I was looking out of the window like every 2 seconds. Then, all of a sudden, somebody tried opening my front door. I jumped up and immediately grabbed my phone again. I looked out of the front window and saw the guy was standing by the door. I moved away from the window and called the cops. Then I tried to make sure that all of my doors were locked and everything. I didn't bother trying to communicate with the man in any form. I was told that the police were on their way and would be there in just a few minutes. Eventually, I checked the windows again, but the man was gone. He was no longer at the front door. I went around to every window again without seeing him. The police got there a short time later, and I figured that the guy had gotten away. I told them his description, and they offered to search my property. To my surprise, they found the man in my yard. He was hiding out behind my shed. And even more of a surprise, it turned out that he was wanted in connection to a robbery. The robbery was in another city about an hour away. I'm guessing that the guy was trying to get out of here, but didn't have a car or any money. That must have been why he was trying to hitchhike. I'm not sure how long he was staying in my town, but he sure gave me the creeps. I'm really glad that I called the police when I did. Back when I was in college, years ago, I had several really late nights doing homework. This wasn't something that I did on a regular basis, but just a few times during projects or things like that. Well, one time I had this really tough project for one of my classes. The good thing is that I had one of my best friends in the class, and we were project partners. So one time I went over to my friend's house, which was a little ways off of campus. I lived in a different college house with a couple of roommates that was about a 5-minute drive from there. So we had a really late night working on the project,
I stayed there until about 2 o'clock in the morning, but we finally finished. Then I was able to leave and went to drive back to my house. When I left my friend's place, I walked out to my car and started driving home. By now, the roads were very quiet. In fact, I didn't see any other cars for the first minute or so. But then, right after I turned onto a road, I remember seeing headlights behind me. I continued to drive back and noticed that a car was following me really close. I wasn't driving particularly slow or anything, so I thought that it was kind of strange. But when I made a few more turns, the car stayed with me. When I had made it pretty close to my house, I was suspicious that I was being followed. I didn't know who was driving this car behind me, but with it being so late at night, I had a bad feeling about it. When I had made it to my street, I started pulling over to the side of the road, sort of in front of my house. We did not have a driveway, so you would just have to park out front. So I pulled over, and when I did, I saw that the car behind me was pulling over as well. I knew this wasn't any of my roommates. I thought about getting out of my car and going inside, but decided not to. So instead, I just sat there inside my car and waited to see what the car behind me would do. Within a few seconds, the driver's door opened. I looked in my mirror and saw a man step out and begin walking in my direction. I did not recognize this guy and had no idea who he was. He was walking at a fast pace straight for me on my driver's side. I had a bad feeling about it, and right when the man was about to reach my door, I hit the gas pedal. I peeled off pretty quickly, and in my mirror, saw the man start sprinting back towards his vehicle. I knew that I had to be fast, so I went to the end of my street and then took a right. Then I took a left very fast into another residential street. I was able to get a decent amount of distance on the guy and couldn't see him behind me, but I also knew that we were about the only two cars out driving right now, so I did my best to keep getting farther away. I turned at a couple more streets, and then there was a gas station. I turned into the gas station parking lot and then went behind the building into the lesser used side with a few parking spaces. After parking, I turned off my headlights. Then I sat there and waited. I could see a few residential roads nearby. A few moments later, I sort of saw a car driving. I think that it was the guy, but he didn't come that close. I kept waiting there in the gas station parking lot for a few more minutes. I figured the guy would still be out there looking for me, but luckily he didn't go to the gas station. Then I turned my headlights off and carefully drove back home. I knew the way back to my house easily and really didn't want the guy to see me. I was able to make it back okay and parked and then quickly went inside. Luckily, the car did not come back. I've always wondered though, why he followed me. I mean, I don't even know who the guy was. I'm almost 100% sure that I didn't cut him off or anything like that. It was 1 o'clock in the morning and nobody else was around. I guess I may never know. Several months ago, I was driving back home late at night. By this time, the roads were very quiet, with not many other cars. I was driving on a typical busy road that's very close to my apartment. I was maybe a mile away from home, and approached the red light of an intersection. I was not paying that well of attention to my surroundings, but I guessed that there was a guy standing on the side of the road, because as I sat at this red light, I remember noticing somebody appear to walk over to my car. I looked over, and a man approached my driver's window. He walked right up to it and then leaned in. I rolled down the window just a crack, wondering what this man wanted. When I did, he did not immediately say anything. I said hi and asked what the man was doing. He still didn't answer me, but then knocked on my driver's window. I was confused, but I was also getting more and more suspicious of the guy. Right then, the light turned green. I was so happy to see that, and I instantly drove away from the man. I watched him sort of return to the side of the road as I drove off. It was a pretty strange experience, but I saw the guy again just a few nights later. Once more, I was driving home late at night, and I came to the same stoplight as before. It turned red, and after I stopped, I once again saw the guy walking over to me. I didn't know where exactly he had come from. Each time when I had approached the light, I didn't see the guy standing on the side of the road or anything, so he walked over to me like a few nights prior to this. After arriving at my driver's window, he knocked on it again. This time, I didn't roll it down at all. I just ignored the guy and hoped that the light would save me and turn green like it had the last time. There really weren't any other cars around besides one that was turning in the intersection. The guy was just standing there, and then all of a sudden, I heard this loud bang at my window. I looked over and saw the man swinging something at it. I really couldn't tell what it was. It was maybe some type of a club. It wasn't very long, but it was obviously creating a very loud noise. He swung it twice more before I left. The last hit cracked my window, but luckily it did not shatter. One more hit to it though, and it would have. I stepped on my gas pedal and went through the red light. Luckily, there were clearly no other cars around. The man stood there in the road and didn't try to come after me. I then dialed 911 on my cell phone and called the police. I reported what happened and where it happened. Then I went home. For several weeks after that, I avoided going through that intersection. I didn't know if the guy just hung out around there or what. I later found out, though, that there had been several other reports of the man in that same area. Apparently, he had approached other drivers and attempted to break in or just cause problems. Somehow, he never seemed to be caught. Since it happened, though, I haven't seen him, and I just recently started going through the intersection again. This happened when I was driving home from work late at night. It was about 2 years ago now. I live on a pretty quiet road, and several roads leading up to it are also usually pretty empty. It's mostly wild land such as woods and farms and things like that. So late at night, the roads are especially empty. At 2 a.m., you probably have a better chance of running into an animal than another person, and that's about what time it was when I was going back on this night in particular. I've always been a night owl, so it's not uncommon for me to be out at that time. I was just a few miles from arriving back and driving down one of the very calm roads. This road is curvy and surrounded by mostly woods on both sides. I was at a straight stretch of the road, and with my headlights noticed something far ahead. There appeared to be small orange cones set up, blocking most of the roadway. The cones were just in front of a turn on the road, which went around a corner. I slowed down, not sure of what the cones were for. I thought that maybe there was a large pothole or something else. It didn't really seem like construction, but I had been on these roads on a daily basis and wasn't aware of what it could be. So I kept going slower and slower until I realized that I would not be able to go around the cones. Then I came to a stop. When I did, I was trying to decide if I should just turn around or go slightly off the road to make it around these cones. Right after I stopped, though, I saw a man appear from around the bend. He was walking towards me, but was not wearing construction clothing or law enforcement clothing either. I was wondering who this guy was and what he was going to do. I could tell that he was looking at me, and the man walked closer to my car and then stopped near the cones. He then moved one of the cones on the end and started to wave my car forward. I slowly began to go forward in the direction that the man was waving me. When I did, he started walking and moved to in front of my car. By now, I was starting to go around the turn. At about this same time, out of nowhere, I saw this other guy walking over. He literally came out of the woods from the passenger side of the road. I also noticed that there were more cones up ahead. The guy coming out of the woods was walking towards my car as well, and I had a really bad feeling about it. I knew these guys had to be up to no good. When the guy was getting even closer, I backed up slightly. Then I turned my wheel and started to go around the guy. When this happened, I heard him begin to shout at me. I really don't remember what he said. Probably just stop or something like that. But I didn't. I ran over several cones and did not care at all. I made my way around the guy and then hit the gas pedal harder. Then I was able to successfully get past the men and the next set of cones as well. I was speeding up, but still driving pretty slowly. Both guys started sprinting after me. but they were not fast enough. I ran right over to the second set of cones and then kept going down the street. There were no problems with the road whatsoever, so I knew that the men had likely just set them up, probably to try to stop traffic, but for what reason, I didn't know. I went the rest of the way back home to my house. Once I was there, I decided to report what happened. I never heard anything more though. I'm guessing that those guys left before the police got there. After that, I never did see them again. This happened a couple of years ago. My best friend Jessica had recently moved into a new apartment. She invited me over to see it, and I was very excited for her. The previous place she lived in was an old dumpy house with a roommate that she did not get along with. This apartment was a much better situation for her. So I remember that night I worked sort of late. I had told Jessica that I would come over after work. It was probably like 8 p.m. and dark out. Jessica had gave me her address, which I put in my phone to get directions. Her place was in an area that I didn't go to that much, but it was only about 10 minutes away. After leaving work, I started to drive there, but just minutes in, my phone died. It was at that point that I realized I did not have a phone charger with me. I kept driving and was about 70% sure that I could get to her apartment on my own. I was trying to remember the route, but I was a little bit mixed up. I ended up turning either too late or too soon, I'm not even sure, but I was going on a highway, and I knew that there was an exit and then just a couple more turns before her place. So when I took the wrong exit, my next turn was also wrong, of course. After about 10 minutes of driving around there, I realized that I messed up and I went back. I took a few more roads and then realized that I was completely lost. Before making things worse, I decided to try to find a gas station or something. I drove around for a couple more minutes until I found one. Then I pulled in and parked. It was quiet, I remember, and my plan was to walk in and get directions. When I made it inside, I went to the clerk at the front counter. I started to ask him if he knew directions, and then mentioned the name of Jessica's apartment complex. He said that he wasn't sure, but just after that, another man walked over and approached me. This guy was a little bit taller than me, was bald, and had a slight beard. He asked me if I was trying to go to the apartment complex that I mentioned, and said that he knew exactly where it was. I said yes, and told him how my phone had died and I was trying to go there. The guy said that he would help me out. He grabbed some flyer that was in the gas station, and then wrote directions for me on the back of it. He wrote the directions starting at the gas station that we were currently at, and then gave them to me. I told him thanks, and then I walked out of the gas station and went back to my car. Now I was on my way again, and only about 10 to 15 minutes later than I would have been. When I got to Jessica's, I would be able to charge my phone. So I started driving, following the directions that the man had wrote for me. I don't remember exactly every turn, but I thought that it would just take me about 5 minutes. I mean, I knew that I was in the general area, but I was just confused on the exact streets. After like 10 minutes, I started to question things a little. The directions had taken me seemingly farther out into the country. For most of the drive to that point, there were businesses around or other apartment buildings. But now, I was driving on a road surrounded by just woods on both sides. There were just a couple more turns though, so I decided to follow the directions through. I made it to the next turn, which surprisingly went onto a dirt road. Then I made the final turn. When I did, I knew it was wrong. It led me to this driveway of a random house. It certainly was not an apartment complex. There was no apartment building in sight. I stopped at the end of the driveway and was wondering what was going on. I looked at the directions again, trying to figure out if I had read them correctly or if I had gone wrong. Just then, as I was reading them over, this car suddenly appeared behind me. The car parallel parked on the side of the road, but completely blocking the driveway that I was in. I thought that maybe it was the homeowner and realized how bad of timing this was. But then the driver's door opened. I saw a man get out and quickly realized that it was the same guy who gave me directions at the gas station. He started walking over to the passenger side of my car and was walking really fast. I put my car into reverse and quickly started backing up. When I did, I went onto the grass to go around his car. Luckily, I didn't get stuck and I made it around the car. The man ran back to his car, but when I made it into the street, I put my car in forward and drove away. I went down that street as fast as I could and luckily was not followed. I went to the next gas station that I saw and went inside. This time, I finally realized that I should buy a phone charger instead of asking for directions. I really wish that I would have thought of that the first time. I was able to make it to Jessica's apartment not long after. I told her the story and we called the police and reported it. I believe the man intentionally gave me those directions to lure me to that property. I'm guessing it was his house. He also seemed to follow me the way back, even though I hadn't noticed. It really gives me the creeps to think back to it. About 5 years ago, I was driving back home from work late one night. I worked at a restaurant/bar at the time and often worked very late. So it was past midnight when I was finally going home and driving my Honda Accord. I lived with my parents during this time in a neighborhood about 10 minutes from my job. So after leaving work, I got onto the roads, which were very quiet, as they often were in the late night hours. It was a huge difference from when I would go to work and there would be lots of cars on the road, to when I would drive home and there would be basically nobody. So within probably 2 or 3 minutes of driving home, I did notice a car behind me. When it started following me though, I had no idea. I kept driving home and was realizing that the car behind me was turning wherever I did. Soon, I was very suspicious that I was being followed. I was never quite 100% sure though. I thought maybe it was a neighbor or something. There are many other houses in the neighborhood. Still, I was suspicious by it. Soon, I had made it to the street where my parents' house was. I turned onto it, and the car behind me did the same. I actually thought about driving around the block or turning around, but ultimately, I drove to my house and pulled into the driveway. I remember being really nervous as I was pulling in that the car would as well, but it didn't. Instead, the car kept going down the street. I felt much better, and then got out of my car and walked inside. By now, my parents and sister had long gone to bed upstairs. The lights were off inside the house, and it was very quiet. I went into the kitchen to make some ramen noodles or something like that. I was very hungry and wanted something quick to have before bed. As I was waiting for the water to heat up though, I casually walked around a little. I went into the living room and glanced out the front window. That's when I noticed a car driving extremely slow down the street. And I further noticed that it was the same car that had seemingly followed me all the way home. Now I was very suspicious. I continued to watch out the window. The car then turned and parked on the side of the street just past our house. I heard the engine turn off and then watched the driver's door open and saw a man get out. He then started walking towards our front yard. That's when I jumped back from the window so that he wouldn't see me. I went back into the kitchen and just hoped that this guy wasn't going to try to break in or something. Seconds later though, there was a knock at the front door. My heart started racing. What could this guy possibly want? Several moments went by and he knocked again. I slowly walked into the living room and went to a window. When I looked outside, I saw the man walking away from the front door, but he wasn't going back to his car. Instead, he walked around the side of our house. I went back into the kitchen and looked out of a back window. I was very careful when I was looking so that I wouldn't be seen. The man appeared to walk through the backyard. He made his way through the backyard and then went out of sight again. I then went back to the front of the house. When I looked out of the window, I didn't see the guy for a while. Soon though, I saw him going through the front yard. He went back to his car, then got inside. Then he drove away. After that, I went back to what I was doing. I looked out of the window a few more times that night, but he didn't come back. I still wonder who he was, why he followed me home, and what he was doing.
This happened to me almost 2 years ago. I was driving home with my friend after doing some homework at a coffee shop. We took a road for about 10 miles before turning left on a more quiet road. When we did, we noticed a truck did the same. We didn't really make anything of this, but once we turned right at the next intersection, the truck did as well, and that got our attention. Maybe I'm just a paranoid person, but whenever I drive at night, I always pay attention to the cars behind me, and if they turn when I do. After following the road for a short distance, it came to a fairly busy road that we had to cross. When we did, the truck crossed it as well. The next turn was for my friend's street, where his house was. It was my car, but my friend was driving it. Once we turned, we saw that the truck turned as well. Both of us got really excited and kind of creeped out as well, seeing that the truck was following us. We thought maybe it was his neighbor, so we started to pull over in front of his house. But the truck pulled over as well. That confirmed 100% to us that we were being followed. For a second, I wanted to go out and confront whoever was in the truck, but my friend talked me out of it. We didn't know why they would follow us. Nothing was wrong with the car, and we hadn't cut anyone off. It had been a pretty normal drive. My friend pulled out of his street, and so did the truck. He said he knew a route that would confuse the truck, and started driving in a large residential neighborhood that was nearby. We took lefts and rights, and after about 10 minutes, we were finally able to lose the truck. We drove around a couple more minutes, and then headed back to his house. When we got to his house, I dropped him off and started to drive home. When I did, I noticed a truck with the lights off peel out and start driving behind me. The truck was back. I started to drive home and was planning to take a really long and confusing way when I suddenly remembered what you're supposed to do when you get followed, which is drive to a police station. I started driving to the police station, and when I arrived, the truck did not follow me in. So after a couple minutes, I left and drove home. I took a really long way home just to be safe, and looked over my shoulders every 2 seconds. I was able to make it home safely. I don't even know why we were being followed in the first place. I just hope I never see that truck again. I was driving home from work one day last year. I worked in the city and lived about 20 miles away, so I'd often hit rush hour on my way home. On this particular day, it was pretty bad. I was merging onto the freeway, and when I did, I accidentally cut somebody off. I didn't mean to cut them off, but it was so busy I made a split-second decision and simply misjudged my space. I felt bad, but it happens, and within a minute I had forgotten all about it. I remained on a freeway for a good 20 minutes and noticed that the car behind me was following extremely close. It didn't concern me. I realized he must be mad about me cutting him off and figured I deserved it. Nothing bothered me until I exited off the freeway at my exit, and the car did as well. It was a kind of old, beat-up looking car. The driver appeared to be a man, but other than that I couldn't make out much detail. He remained extremely close to my car. I guess there was a slim chance he wasn't following me, so I took the next turn, but he did as well. I didn't want this nut following me all the way home, so I pulled into a gas station to see what would happen. He followed me in. I guess I thought he wouldn't do anything if there were other people around, so I parked at a parking space. He drove his car right behind mine to block me in. Now I felt dumb. This was not one of my brightest ideas. The man got out of his car. He looked to be in his 30s and had blonde hair. He walked in a fast pace towards my car. I locked my doors. He came up to my window and knocked on it. He knocked so hard I thought the window might break. He started yelling and cursing at me. There were a few people at the gas station and they started to look over at what was going on. I thought about calling the police, but after some people from the gas station started to approach us, the man got back in his car and drove off. I was relieved to see him drive away, and I pulled out a couple minutes later and went home. I couldn't stop looking behind me on the drive back, but he didn't follow me anymore. Some drivers have terrible road rage, and I've learned to drive much safer since then. I was driving back from Kentucky to Illinois once. I would frequently make long drives for work, and I would drive at all hours of the night. On this day, I was somewhere in northern Kentucky, about 3 hours into my drive, which would be an all-nighter. It was about 1 a.m., and I had to take a detour due to construction on a major road. I was annoyed because this would delay me, but I kept driving. It took me on a little highway, and then through a small town. The road was very quiet, and as I passed through the little town, I noticed a car on the side of the road. I figured it was a cop, so I slowed down a little bit. I wasn't speeding, but that's just a reaction I tend to have. As I got closer, I saw that it was not a cop car, but just a regular-looking car. When I passed by the car, it pulled out and began to follow me. I didn't know why the car would follow me, but I just kept driving as best I could. After about 10 minutes of driving, the car began to speed up and get closer to me. I started to get annoyed. He pulled out behind me and was now tailing me. I pulled over to the side of the road to let it pass by, but instead, the car pulled over as well. I was kind of mad, so I thought I would ask the driver what his deal was. I'm 6'3" and weigh about 210 pounds, so I figured I could take him, whoever he was. I stopped my car and got out. I stood next to my car, facing the car behind me. The door started to open, and then it shut. The car then took off and started driving straight for me. I couldn't believe my eyes. I quickly jumped on the hood of my own car. I got out of the way with about 1 second to spare as his car whizzed by me. It also came about a foot from scraping my car. I immediately got back in my car, made a U-turn, and started driving the opposite direction. The car kept going the other way down the road. After a minute or so, I pulled over and took out my phone to call the police, but I had no signal. I ended up driving back to the freeway I had been on earlier, where I had service and was able to report the incident. I also found another route to take home. It took me an extra hour, but I was able to make it home safe. That was one of the scariest moments of my life. In the summer of 2018, I was taking a road trip with 2 of my friends to Cleveland. We were planning to arrive in Cleveland at about 11 p.m. Everything was going smoothly, and at around 10 p.m., we were about an hour away. My friend Sean said he really needed to use the bathroom, and my friend John, who was driving, really didn't want to stop. After arguing back and forth for several minutes, John finally pulled off the freeway and into a rest stop. The rest stop was quiet, but there were about 2 or 3 cars spread out over the parking lot. Sean got out and went to the bathroom. Me and John stayed in the car to wait. After about a minute, we saw Sean running from the bathrooms and toward us. He got in the back of the car and yelled at John to drive. Sean loves to mess with people, so we figured he was pulling a joke on us. John told him to shut up and laughed a little. "No, I'm serious," said Sean. He pointed outside the car. We then saw a man walking toward us. Without saying a word, John started the car and drove off. We saw the man sprinting and we pulled away. I didn't get a good look at the man as it was nighttime, but I saw him run to a car and get in as we left the parking lot. John started driving down the road, asking who it was. Sean just said to drive faster as he was following us. The man's car was an old Saturn that was red and kind of beat up looking. We could barely see it, but it started to get closer in our rearview mirror. John started to drive faster, and the car did as well. There wasn't too much traffic on the road, but John started to pass cars left and right, all while the red car remained about 10 car lengths behind us. John then began driving so fast that we went over 100 miles per hour. I remember looking at the dash and seeing 112. We didn't care if we got pulled over because we were being chased by someone. Finally, the car got farther away. John then slowed down really suddenly and took an exit. I thought the car was going to flip the way he pulled off the freeway. The tires skidded and he went under a bridge and then made a U-turn before going back on the freeway the opposite direction. I have to admit, I was pretty impressed with the move. The car lost us, and then we were able to get back on the freeway going the other direction and arrive at our hotel only about 30 minutes late. We finally asked Sean to tell us why the man was chasing him. He said when he got in the bathroom, he saw a man who was smoking and asked Sean if he had any drugs. Sean responded with, "No, I'm not an idiot." The man then got angry and cursed at Sean, and when Sean walked away, he saw the man start to walk after him, which is when he started running. I feel lucky to be alright after that crazy incident. The rest of our time in Cleveland was great, and that was one of the most memorable road trips I've been on so far. A few years back, when I was in college, I used to work real late nights during the summer. I had an internship with a company that was way out in the middle of nowhere. Miles surrounding the area were just woods and fields. About a month into the job, I finished work one night at about 3 in the morning and then got into my car to drive home. It would usually take me about 20 minutes to get back to my temporary apartment that I lived in for the summer. About halfway through the drive, I started to hear my car sputter. It was an old beater because I was in college and I didn't have much money. I did what I could to keep the car going, but it ended up dying and slowly coming to a stop on the side of the road. This road was completely empty with no other cars in sight, and it was surrounded by a little ditch with woods on both sides. I tried starting the car multiple times, but I realized that it wasn't going to do much good. I wasn't much of a car expert, and I honestly had no clue what to do. I knew it wasn't out of gas, so I decided to call my roadside assistance. I was told due to my location it would take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour for them to arrive. I decided to play on my phone and watch YouTube videos until they got there, so I took out my headphones and put them in. After I would guess about 15 or 20 minutes, I was interrupted by the sound of my back door trying to be opened. My doors were locked, and I figured the roadside service was there, so I took out my headphones and looked behind me expecting to see a truck, but nothing was there at all. The moon was fairly big that night, so I could see around pretty well due to the light, but I didn't see anybody. I spent a good minute just looking around trying to figure out who was trying to open my door. I knew what I heard, and I wasn't imagining it. Then my eyes scanned around to the woods, and I saw a tree move. When I looked closer, I saw what appeared to be a man digging at the base of a tree just inside the woods. He was wearing a green jacket and appeared to have brown hair and a dark-colored beard. That's all I was able to make out. He was on his knees and digging with his hands. The sight of it gave me a very creepy feeling. The thought of the man possibly trying to get into my car made me even more scared. So many questions went through my head, like who was this man and why was he in the middle of nowhere digging in the woods with his hands? The man continued to dig for several more minutes. I just sat in my car, being as still as I could, hoping he wouldn't come over to me. This went on for what felt like forever. Finally, I saw headlights behind me and a truck which was roadside service. When they pulled up, I saw the man turn and go deeper into the woods. But he didn't get up and run. He left on all fours like he was some sort of an animal. I was more than happy to get out of there, and very shortly after that, I got a new car. Hopefully nothing like that ever happens again. This story happened roughly 15 years ago. I was on my way driving back from college. I attended a school in Florida and lived in the Midwest, so it would always be a long drive back home. Usually, I would do the trip in 2 days, but on this time, I decided to drive through the night. I left my college campus and drove for many hours, only stopping for gas or food or to use the bathroom. I was actually making really good time, and when it got late at night, things got even better because traffic decreased a lot. I stopped and got some energy drinks to keep me up and drove for several hours. Then at about 3 in the morning, my light for gas came on, which usually meant I had about 40 miles before I would run out. I was honestly in the middle of nowhere, so I decided I would stop at the next exit and see if there was a gas station. An exit eventually came up, and I took it. I went right and drove down a very quiet road for a while. It took me maybe 2 or 3 miles, and I didn't really see anything, so I thought about turning around, but then I saw some lights up ahead which looked promising. The road curved a little, and then I came into a small town. The speed limit dropped all the way down to 20 miles per hour, and there was old, run-down looking buildings on each side. It honestly looked like a ghost town, but I figured they would have to have a gas station, so I slowly kept driving. But the farther I drove, I didn't see any gas station, and then there started to be mainly old houses, so I decided to turn around. I turned into a driveway, and as soon as I did, I saw the front door of the house open. An older-looking man came out and started walking to me. I made a signal with my hands that I was just turning around, and then I started backing out. The man looked a little confused. When I turned around and began driving the other direction, I saw that 2 more people were standing at the ends of their driveways, staring at me with angry looks on their faces. For some reason, it just really freaked me out. I decided to ignore it and keep driving. When I got back to the town, though, it got even worse. There were at least 10 people on each side of the road in front of the buildings, all staring at me. It was the creepiest thing I've ever seen. They all looked very unfriendly. As I drove the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, they started to walk into the road, almost to approach my car. I wasn't sure what else to do, so I sped up and drove faster and faster until I was out of there. I quickly got back onto the main freeway and drove until I saw another exit about 10 miles down the road. It was a close call, but I was able to find a gas station and fill my tank. I drove home after that, and I'm not even sure where that was, but something about that small town at 3 a.m. and all the people in it was just so creepy. It still gives me the chills to think about.
I travel quite a bit for my job, and most of the time I drive myself. It takes me all over the country, and typically I enjoy it a lot, but I've had some interesting experiences. One of those happened 2 years ago now. I was driving home, but still a good distance away. I was somewhere in Arkansas, I believe, in seemingly the middle of nowhere. For some reason, I was not on the highway, but a quieter road. I don't recall if there was construction or if I took a wrong turn or what, but on both sides of the road was just grass and occasionally trees or woods. I remember that my signal went out on my phone. Obviously, I had directions on my phone, but they soon went away with my signal. Nothing would load, and I had to just hope that I was going in the right direction. Soon it became later and later at night. I hadn't booked a hotel, but had been planning to do so when I stopped for gas. Eventually, I remember that my car made a noise, and I realized that I was running low on gas. Meanwhile, I still had no service. The last thing I wanted was to be stranded out here with no signal and no fuel. I decided that I would take the next exit and hope that there was a gas station up ahead. So about a mile later, I saw a road on the right that looked promising. I turned down it and started driving. Soon I saw a sign for a gas station, but it was down yet another road. The sign said that it was 4 miles down that road. It seemed pretty far, but I could make it. So I drove the 4 miles and soon arrived at the gas station. When I got there, I saw that it was certainly in the middle of nowhere. There were some trees and wild land around it, but other than that, there were no other businesses or anything nearby. I parked next to one of the gas pumps, and I checked my phone. It still had no service. I looked to the convenience store connected to the gas station, but it was closed. Luckily, I could still get gas. I got out of my car, and it was crazy how quiet it was. I started fueling my car, and I looked around. There were no other cars driving by or anything. But when I was looking around, I looked into the direction of the small convenience store building. There was a man standing kind of behind it and on the side. He appeared to be looking right at me. I was wondering who he was and what he was doing there. It was really sketchy. I couldn't see many details about the man because of how dark it was and how far away he was from me. I looked away and casually looked elsewhere. But I had a bad feeling about the guy and thought about being done getting gas even though the tank wasn't full. However, I was in the middle of nowhere and knew that I needed the fuel, so I let it run. I looked back over to the direction of the man, and he was still there and still looking at me. This was creepy to say the least. Just when my gas tank was full,
I started to take the pump out and noticed the man disappear behind the building. I was glad that he was gone, and also wondered what he was doing. I got inside my car, breathing a sigh of relief. Then I started the engine and checked my phone yet again for service. I still had nothing. I was about to drive away when I noticed a car driving around from behind the gas station, and I don't even think that car had been on the road. I'm pretty sure behind the building was just dirt. I realized that it was likely the man that had been watching me. I started to drive away and saw the headlights of the car behind me. When I left the parking lot, the car followed me. Now I was once again really creeped out. Whoever this guy was following me. It seemed like he had his brights on as well. I couldn't tell any details of what the guy looked like. I moved over to the side of the road, hoping that he would pass me, but he stayed on me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't drive to a police station because I didn't know where any of them were. I also didn't have any service on my phone, so I couldn't call the police or look up directions to anywhere. At least I had a full tank of gas though. I would have to just drive and hope to find a place that I could go or lose the tail of the car. I drove back towards the highway that I had previously been on. But after going straight for a while, I panicked and turned. When I drove down that street a little ways, I turned again. I really had no clue where I was going. I just felt like if I turned a lot, maybe the guy behind me would get tired of following me. He didn't seem to though, and remained right on my tail. Eventually, I made it to a slightly larger and busier road. However, nobody else was out. I didn't see a single other vehicle. The guy remained right behind me as I drove down this road for a while. Soon, I turned again, and I turned at just about every single opportunity that I got. After driving around and randomly turning for probably 15 more minutes, I decided to just go straight for a while. I didn't know where I was, but honestly, I was tired of turning. I drove down that street for a few minutes. Then, suddenly, the car behind me just turned onto a random road. I had to look twice, and I couldn't believe my eyes, but it was finally gone. I kept driving, and then I turned onto another road in case the car changed its mind. From there, I checked my phone, but still had no service. I decided to just keep driving down that road until I got a signal again. It took me almost an hour, but finally I had coverage. I first looked up directions to a nearby town. I found a hotel room and then called the police and reported the whole situation. I'm not sure if that man was ever located. I still wonder who he was and what he was doing, and I'm really glad that I made it out of there okay.